In times of crisis, chaos and change, it can be very tempting to feel powerless, like there's nothing that you can do. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. If you use your imaginations, your minds, and your creativity, you may be able to fight your way out of anything. And I should know, I lived during the time of the English Civil War. Very scary indeed, but on the plus side, this face was around, so not all bad. And being around during the English Civil War, I once took an entire castle from the enemy, not using swords or muskets or cannon, but using some beds I found. Welcome to the world of histrionics, incredible tales from right out of my mouth. Sorry, got that wrong. Welcome to the world of histrionics, incredible tales from my amazing face. All right, fine. Incredible tales from before my face. No, fine. Incredible tales from before the now. My name is Colonel John Morris, and I was doing rather well for myself in the late 1630s and early 1640s. I joined the army. I had been an ensign and a lieutenant and a captain under Thomas Wentworth, the Earl of Strafford. I did rather well. Now, fortunately, Strafford died and I transferred to a different unit, but I became a sergeant major and did rather well at the siege of Ross Castle in Ireland in 1641. Even though I was horribly injured, I managed to get a few of our men away during the retreat. Then, of course, came the English Civil War. Actually, sometimes called the War of the Three Kingdoms, and sometimes known as three separate wars because there were small breaks in between, so sort of three separate wars with two breaks, almost like it was an enormous sports match, and we needed to have a bit of a rest for crisps. Oh no, but it wasn't about crisps. It was far more serious than crisps. No, not twiglets. I speak, of course, of the rights of man and freedoms. Oh, yes. You see, the king at the time, Charles I, believed utterly and totally in the divine right of kings. That is, that God, had decided that he could be king. And that no one could tell him what to do. Not even the government or parliament could make rules. He had disbanded them several times, refused to listen to them, and had dissolved them for years. Don't worry, they're not strange people who were made of chalk and he put them in water. I mean that he essentially stopped parliament from meeting so that he could go around and do what he wanted. How unusual. So, he even tried once to arrest several members of parliament, and they decided they'd had enough. And in 1642, war broke out between the Parliament and the King. I mean, could you imagine the government and royalty fighting? If you're finding this all a little bit confusing, imagine, if you will, for a moment to understand what it's like, Boris Johnson having a massive wrestling match with the Queen. Actually, don't imagine that at all. It's a very frightening image and goes absolutely no way to explaining exactly what was going on at all. Anyway, look, essentially, the king and parliament didn't get on, and there were two forces, right? It wasn't just the king against everyone. It wasn't a giant man fighting everybody in the UK, right? So, who we had was parliamentarians and royalists. Now, sometimes they're called Roundheads and Cavaliers, apparently because of their haircuts. The Roundheads, so called because, of course, all the parliamentarians shave their heads religiously. And Cavaliers are the royalists because they have massive moustaches, beards, and very long curly hair. No, we don't carry oil wax with us en masse. We don't carry an enormous amount of hair products and moustache glues and things like that. We don't all carry huge scissors around. Do you know how difficult it is to cut your hair in a time of crisis? Do you? Yes, I bet you do. Well, I've known some officers, of course, carry moustache wax and things like that around with them, and some of the men no doubt cut their hair a fair bit, but a lot of us, after a while of several years of campaigning, we all looked exactly the same, which makes things very, very difficult. We all look a bit rugged and a bit rough and a bit unwashed. Some, yes, generals and leaders had their own colours and their own flags and jackets and hose in different colour combinations, and that's very easy to make out when you're on a large field, but a little bit difficult if you're all squished together. Everyone tends to be wearing shirts like this, or hats like this, or buff coats like I'm wearing. Everybody carries muskets or pikes or swords like this, which is called a tuck, although mine is called Steve. Hey, Steve. This is going to come in very handy for me later. But during the late 1640s, things went very well indeed for Parliament, and I was very pleased because I had decided to join Parliament's forces. Yes, when Liverpool fell in 1644, I threw up my commission and joined Parliament's army. But by 1645, something incredible had happened. The new model army had been created. A professional fighting force. Revolutionary. And they, generally speaking, looked the same in lovely bright red uniforms, and they were led by Black Tom, Thomas Fairfax, who didn't really like me. We had a sort of a clash of interest, clash of personalities. Didn't get on. I felt my face didn't fit with the model army, so I decided to ignore my commission and go home. Had a bit of a think about what to do next. And I decided maybe I'd overdone it a bit. You see, following Naseby in 1645, that was a big and important battle. In 1646, the First Civil War ended, and the king, King Charles I, was captured and put in prison. Oh. Now, I didn't like the king overly, but I'm not sure we should put him in prison. Because you know what happens to people that get put in prison and convicted. They get locked away, or even worse, executed. Well, I'm not sure I want that to happen, so I decided to switch sides and become a royalist. But what to do? I didn't have time to grow a massive moustache. Of course not, that's nonsense. What to do? How to convince my new friends, the royalists, that I was truly on their side. And after a great deal of thinking, I came upon a genius idea. I lived very close to the castle of Pontefract. Now, the castle had been, for many years, a royalist stronghold, but some parliamentarians had captured it very recently. All I would have to do was capture the castle, and the royalists would take me back in a stroke. How to capture it, though? Well, I happen to know the governor of Pontefract. Yes, I knew him from the siege at Sandal Castle, and I knew that even though he was a parliamentarian, he had royalist sympathies. I wrote him a letter saying that if he would let me in, and then we could become royalists together. And all he had to do was let me in through a sallyport. Now, a sallyport is not a nice lady that works at castle customs. No, a sallyport is a fixed door in a castle wall that can be shielded and disguised, but you can get in. It was a genius plan. He would just let me in, and I would get my sword and go charge, just me on my own. Yeah! And take the castle. Problem. The commander, the chap I knew, Overton was his name, and he was reassigned to Hull. Oh. He went to the garrison at Hull, and the new commander of Pontefract, I didn't know him at all, or have his address, so I couldn't write him any letters or talk to him. He might be a genuine parliamentarian. What to do now? I had a long think, and an even longer think, and then an even longer think. I could have become a royalist by all the strokey beard thinking I was doing, and then, came upon the best idea I'd ever had in my entire life. Pontefract Castle had very high walls. I used a ladder. I know, a ladder. I scaled a ladder right up the castle walls, and wouldn't you know it, they were expecting that. They were as clever as me. One of them had seen me placing the ladder, waited till I was near the top, and pushed me off. There I was, thinking I was taking my genius to new heights, but no, my plan has not rung true, and it was a step in the wrong direction. I fell right off and was seriously injured. Well, I fell on the ground. Well, okay, I fell into a soft patch of stinging nettles. All right, one stinging nettle, but it really hurt my finger. What to do now? I took off my uniform, wandered back into the town, and had a bit of a think. And I was sitting outside when some soldiers passed me. They were Parliamentarian soldiers who were stationed in the castle, and they were having a bit of a chat. Would you believe that the previous commander, the person that I know who had gone to Hull, had allowed soldiers to quarter in the town, had allowed them in rooms or houses to sleep at night in homes, and then pop back to the castle in the daytime to defend it, like this was some kind of part-time job or a holiday? Well, this was incredible. Furthermore, was it even more amazing because they were angry that the new commander had quite rightly insisted that all of them now quarter themselves inside the castle, and he would order new beds for them. Ha ha! Yes, this was the moment of my genius! I would disguise myself as a massive living bed, a bed monster who would walk up the road to Pontefract and say, I am Jeff the bed monster, take me in and you can all sleep on my face. And then when they did, I would get my sword and I would attack. Yes, all right, it was a ridiculous idea. No one's going to believe Jeff the bed monster. And one of the chaps that I knew, who was a royalist and a soldier, had a bit of a chat with me and said, actually, wouldn't it be a better idea just to use your vast fortune there, John, to go and to buy the beds first? Yes, Yes, it would. It would rain on my parade slightly. I'd rather enjoyed making a large bed monster costume, but fine. So I went back home, got a lot of money, came back to Pontefract and used my money to buy mattresses first. Now, remember what I said earlier on about all of the soldiers looking exactly the same? Well, all we had to do was walk up toward the gates with the mattresses and scaring our faces so you couldn't see. And then when we got to the gates, they thought that we were on their side. They opened the gates. They let us in, and when they did, we drew our swords and announced ourselves as royalists. The parliamentarians agreed to lock themselves in the dungeon. They did so. We could hear them singing in there and chanting in there and even scratching on the walls with, I don't know, belt buckles, I suppose. Graffitiing, could you believe that? Their own names. One of the parliamentarian soldiers came up to me and asked if he could go home at night and promised he would come back 7 a.m. first thing in the morning and lock himself in the dungeon. What? What idiot would ever agree to that? No, thank you. Get back in the dungeon. The only person to be hurt in the entire affair was the new commander. He had tried to resist us, and one of my soldiers had to knock him about a bit. But generally speaking, nobody was hurt. We managed to take Pontefract Castle with some beds. No injuries. We had to give up the castle the following year, yes, on the 17th of March, 1649, surrounded and horribly outnumbered by parliamentarian forces. But we were one of the last castles to surrender. Oh yes, to the parliamentarians and to the Roundheads. One of the very last, if not the actual total last one. And do you know, the commander of the parliamentarian forces who enforced our surrender refused to take mine. He wouldn't let me, and I know why. I recognised him. I'd been a parliamentarian before, hadn't I? Yeah, technically, treason, treachery. He didn't trust me, but he did give me a fighting chance. He said that he would let me go, I could try and escape, he would chase me, but if I got more than 10 miles away, then he would stop chasing me. It was while he was explaining the rules of this to me that I quickly jumped on a horse and rode away. Ha 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 ha! Bye! And I got all the way to Lancashire, which is where Histrionic Studios caught up with me for this rather charming interview. So, remember, if you do think there is absolutely nothing you can do, you might be wrong. Just have a bit of a think. Have a sit down. Have a lie down. Clear your mind, and you never know. Dressing up as an enormous bed monster for some reason might just solve all your problems. So, thank you very much indeed for listening to our video today. I've been Colonel John Morris, and hey, if you've liked this video, then feel free to like it with the thumbs up, or share it, or subscribe, and maybe even watch a few more Histrionics videos while you're here. Thanks very much for tuning in, and stay safe, won't you?